Language and Concept Development Across the Day, Week 3, Focus on Language. The guiding question for this week is, how can I uncover the language demand of my instruction? When teachers think about language, they sometimes think only about vocabulary. In this case, the definition of rain. However, language has other aspects that are equally important. Language serves specific functions. In this case, the sentence using the vocabulary word rain serves the function of informing. Queen Victoria's reign lasted for about 64 years. Here are common functions used in academic language. These include seek information, inform, compare and contrast, and so forth. If you reflect on your instruction over the past week, it's likely you've asked students to use one or more of these functions. You may not have considered how difficult some of these functions are for students learning an additional language. Informing may be one of the easier functions of language, since giving information is a common purpose for talking or writing. But even this simple informative sentence has specific structures students need to know. For instance, students need to be familiar with proper nouns, possessives, past tense, and declarative sentences. They need to know that sentence order is a subject followed by a verb, and that lasted is a verb that conveys a time period, which is a less commonly used meaning for the word last. Letter sounds and spellings are also language structures. Students need to know the letters EI in the word rain make an A sound and not an E sound, and that there are two additional nouns pronounced the same way but spelled differently. Every language has unique structures, and part of becoming proficient in a second language is learning those structures. For instance, every language or dialect has a unique and finite set of sounds, which is referred to as phonology. Sounds are important because a difference in the sound makes a difference in the meaning. To a native English speaker, the words tin, ten, ton, tan, and tune are distinct. A second language learner may not hear the difference. Graphophonics, which is critical to literacy development, is the representation of sounds through symbols. English is challenging because the same letters can represent more than one sound, like the TH in thin, thatch, this, and that. In addition, a single sound can be represented by different symbols, like the eh sound in say, way, tail, and sail. Morphology represents units of meaning. This is more than just words. For example, let's consider the statement, she walks. The S at the end of walks is a morpheme because it indicates third-person singular. In the word boats, the meaning of the S is more than one boat. Morphology also includes articles, quantifiers, demonstratives, personal pronouns, question words, possessives, prepositions, auxiliary verbs, and conjunctions. Syntax is putting words together in the right order. It includes aspects of grammar such as tense, person, and word order. Basic structures of English may represent challenges for your bilingual learners. It is not necessary to address every single grammar structure. Just notice what students have to do a lot of in your lesson. Is it asking questions, or describing attributes using adjectives, or predicting using the future tense? You may think this is the job of the ELD or ESL teacher, but all teachers need to be aware of language demand and provide bilingual learners with models and time to practice. This does not mean grammar worksheets, but rather time to hear and see, as well as practice orally. The language demands of school are not exclusive to academic content. If you look at these language functions characteristic of social interaction, you will notice other language skills that your bilingual learners need to master in order to be successful participants in classroom activities. These are things that we take for granted as native speakers of the language, but all students need to become adept at using the right words for the right occasion. To get an idea of how it can be useful to make the language demand visible, imagine the following scenario. As part of a unit on explorers, students have written research reports about an explorer of their choice. For the culminating activity, students will participate in a living museum where students take on the role of their explorers, ready to answer questions about themselves based on their research. In a report, a student might write, "Marco Polo was one of the most important explorers of the 13th century. He was born in the year 1254. His father and his uncle asked him to join them on their world adventures." The initial report is written in the third person. For the living museum, the student will have to switch to the first person. At the most basic level, the student will need to be prepared to say, "My name is Marco Polo. I am one of the most important explorers of the 13th century." This shift to first person requires changes in verbs, pronouns, and possessives. Once prompted with an example, most native English speakers will automatically make the changes to shift to the first person. Bilingual learners may or may not recognize the need to make the shift. Even if they do, they may still lack the linguistic knowledge of English necessary to do so correctly, which makes the activity challenging. Does this mean bilingual learners shouldn't participate in the Living Museum? Of course not. They can and should participate. However, they will benefit from opportunities to recognize and practice the language structures. As their teacher, you could pull a small group aside for just 10 minutes to point out the changes and allow them to rehearse. This will give them more confidence to participate in the whole group activity.